And right now it's time to bring in my good friend and co-host Jeff Small, as well as our guest Greg McBride. He's Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Analyst for Bankrate.com. Greg, thanks for being back here with us.
Thanks for having me.
What a difference nearly 6 months make. I think it was just about March 1st you were with us last. We were just talking about the very beginning of this whole coronavirus situation. Did you ever expect that unemployment would have gotten as high as it did? At the peak, I think it was officially over 15%, and many people confirmed that the real unemployment rate was actually over 20. Were you surprised when it got that high?
Things unraveled very quickly. And so, I think it was a shock to all of us because these are numbers that we hadn't seen. We went from the lowest unemployment in 50 years to the highest in 90, and we did it in 8 weeks. I mean, if somebody had written that movie script at the beginning of the year, you'd have thrown it in the garbage.
Yeah, this is really, it was the only time we had worse unemployment than that really was the Great Depression. Of course, fortunately, we recovered a lot quicker. The Great Depression was a slow bleed in the unemployment rate over the first 3 years or so. And now this time we fell off a cliff and then we kind of climbed partway back up the cliff. So right now we're looking at rates officially are a little bit over 10%, unofficially probably closer to 14, 15. So where do you see this getting by the end of the year? I know it depends upon the virus and all, but what's your best guesstimate of a range at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, somewhere in that 9 to 11% as far as the headline unemployment number is concerned. And a lot of that is just going to depend on what we see with regard to the virus in the second half of the year and the effect that has on demand. It's not just people's ability to spend, it's their willingness to do so in the face of the virus. And until we really get that under control, it's not going to unleash the true willingness and ability that consumers have to go out and spend.
So when you say the headline unemployment rate, do you mean the 10 number, that's the official number, or the 14 that's the unofficial?
Yeah, I'm talking about the 10 number, the one that gets widely reported. Of course, it bears pointing out that even that is, that's not the complete picture in the sense that, it's not counting people that are in business for themselves. There are, for example, 28 million people still drawing some form of unemployment right now. And that's because people that are not normally eligible for unemployment assistance, like contractors, independent contractors, and people in business for themselves, are able to get some money that way. But it really, gives you the big picture as to the extent of unemployment, something that extends well beyond that 10% headline rate.
So the headline rate's 10. You said 9 to 11 by the end of the year. So you're kind of expecting we're going to level off where we are here for a while. So how long do you think it takes to get back, let's say, under 6% or under 5% or something that's considered a really healthy economy?
Honestly, it's probably going to take us, 2-3 years, maybe more. And a lot of that just depends on the trajectory of the recovery. I mean, as you noted, the economy had a sudden stop. Normally when we have a recession, it's kind of a slow, grinding descent into a recession. And this wasn't. We had a very robust economy, strong labor market. And then overnight, we turned out the lights, sent everybody home, and told them to stay there, right? So you saw this, rapid spike in unemployment. But as things reopened, we also saw pretty impressive rebound, not only in terms of people getting called back to work, but I think even more so spending. People were going out and spending. Now that's leveled out recently. Some of that is because of the resurgence of the virus. Some of that is because some states have kind of rolled back some stages of that reopening. So, it's not a cop-out, but, frankly, it all really depends on the virus. Until the virus is under control, it's not going to unleash the full recovery power. I mean, you look at things like low interest rates. Those low interest rates will be a nice tailwind on the recovery, but only once the virus is under control and we can get, quote unquote, back to normal.
Well, it's funny, you mentioned the confidence, and unfortunately, Congress having gone on recess without having settled the additional unemployment payment, I don't think it's doing very much at all for people's confidence and willingness to go out and spend. So that's another, obviously, moving part. Jeff?
Hey, Greg. Long time no talk. It's great to see you back on the show. And, I want to try and be optimistic here about what's going to happen with employment going forward. Everything is contingent upon the virus, but I don't want to beat the virus up. But let's say that we get a good vaccine that works, lowers mortality, lowers hospitalizations, lowers the range of symptoms that people get or the time that they have the infection, and we can get back to a more manageable environment like we can with a common cold on the virus. How long is it going to take to recapture 28 million jobs to get us back down to that 3.5% unemployment rate? What would be the anticipated ramp-up time and rate that you would see if we had a good therapeutic by way of a vaccine and way of lowering mortality?
Well, I mean, I think, that scenario you've presented there with the vaccine and the therapeutics, I mean, that's really the key. That gets us on the expressway in terms of economic recovery. And so, that's where we do start to see a more robust and sooner economic recovery. And some of those forecasts that, the economy is not going to return to the same size as it was at the end of 2019 until the end of 2022. Well, all of a sudden that starts to get brought forward with, an effective vaccine and therapeutics that allow people to unleash that true spending power. However, that 3.5% unemployment, I don't think it's healthy for us to anchor to that number, because even then it was the lowest in 50 years. So it's not like that's the natural rate of unemployment necessarily. It was 50 years since we'd last been that low. For us to get back to that level, coming off of such an elevated level of unemployment, I just don't think that that's likely to materialize in the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, so you said 4 to 5 years? You think it'll take us 4 to 5 years to reemploy and get us back down to, let's say, the Fed's perfect range is 4.5 to 3.5? You think it'll take 4 or 5 years? Is that what I hear you saying, Greg?
Yeah, I think to get below that 4.5% mark it's going to take at least 4 years, if even that. I think you will see more material moves, as we've already seen. You'll see that continue, but then once you get down below 6, below 5, that's where the progress becomes tougher sledding. And so I don't think it's healthy to anchor to that 3.5% unemployment.
We need to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a moment, and you stay with us. We'll be back here with more from Greg McBride right here on The Income Generation. We'll be right back. And now it's time to bring back my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small, as well as a good friend of The Income Generation, Greg McBride, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Analyst for Bankrate.com. So Jeff, you were on a roll there. I'm going to hand it right back to you.
Thanks, Dave. So Greg, I don't want to get political on you because we're apolitical. We're supposed to be apolitical here sometimes.
That means he's about to get political, by the way, in case you're wondering.
That's right. Well, listen, I want to focus for a second on the congressional stalemate and what the impact of that is on unemployment benefits. We know in 2008, when we had the credit crisis, they extended benefits for a year beyond the normal limitations of unemployment benefits. And there's no doubt people need support. But, where do you see the end in support? I mean, Trump had to do an executive order to get the states to coincide with him, and he was going to add $300-400 a week. The states were going to make up the difference. But now he's being held hostage by Congress people. And so where do you see that ending up? And because the important thing is we've got to help the American people. We've got to help people that are unemployed in this crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that was behind that robust recovery that we started to see as states were reopening after the initial shutdown was the fact that people were able to spend because they had money to spend. And if you take away some of that money, or even the threat of it, it really impacts not only people's ability to spend, but their willingness to do so. And so right now, there are tens of millions of Americans that they have seen a significant drop off in what they were receiving. And look, I think in terms of aid to the consumer, we talk about the 28 million that are unemployed, and that they've seen that $600 a week federal supplement go away. Let's not forget, 49% of all households have seen a hit to their incomes since the outbreak of the pandemic. The fact is, there may be 28 million drawing unemployment, but there's an equal amount that they're working, but they're working less. They've taken a pay cut. They're making less money. And so, there's a big hole that needs to be filled in terms of consumer income, and therefore the ability to spend. Needless to say, 70% of our economic output is tied to consumer spending. So that's really key.
Yeah, those are all really good points, Greg. I think in addition to all that, though, there needs to be another round of PPP benefits because so many small businesses are on the brink with the lack of consumer demand. They're on the brink of not existing here. And so there's got to be some more stimulus there in addition to other packages that they're putting together. So I wish they would get off the political bandwagon here and do what's right for the American people. Dave, what do you think about that? You're apolitical sometimes.
Yeah, so you did a not so good job at staying apolitical, but that's all right. I expect nothing less from you. Yeah, the PPP I think is important, and Congress is going to do what Congress is going to do. There's going to be gridlock, maybe, and I think that's going to kill confidence, with the consumer. But Greg, what I'd like you to do is just explain for our viewers and our listeners the ultimate domino effect that occurs, in your own words as an economist, the ultimate domino effect when people are unemployed, they spend less, how that dominoes fall and how it affects all other areas of the economy that people may not even be thinking of.
Well, to put it bluntly, one person's income, is the spending that then becomes somebody else's income. And so that's that domino effect you're talking about. And so, more than 2/3 of our economic output is tied to consumer spending. And that's because dollars are getting turned over again and again. One person earns it, they spend it. That's somebody else's earnings that they then spend, and so on down the line. But, just as with a line of dominoes, you take one or two out, or if you don't knock over the first one, and that really disrupts the entire flow. And that's exactly where we are from an economic standpoint. And Jeff's point about the aid to small businesses, absolutely, I totally agree. That's really the backbone, not only of job growth traditionally in the U.S., but really sort of the backbone of our economy. That's how America was built, was on the back of small businesses. The longer that this persists, the more that will go from temporarily shutting down to permanently shutting down.
Yeah, I think people think sometimes if there's less consumer spending, it just affects the stock market. But what they don't realize is that it affects other people's, if corporations aren't making as much money, there's less demand for goods and services, they lay more people off. Now there's more people with an unwillingness to spend, and therefore they spend less, and then more people get laid off as a result of that, less revenue going to corporate America, and that spiral just begins. So in the minute or so we have left, I'd like you to share with our viewers and our listeners the best advice you think today. On March 1st, you said, I'm worried about the bond market because interest rates could go up and that could hurt bonds and yields are low. But a few weeks after that, we had a lot of major companies in the S&P 500 actually cut stock dividends. So are you still looking at stock dividends as a good way to provide income, or other things like preferred stocks, or maybe some bonds if you can find them that actually have a good yield? Talk to our viewers and listeners.
Well, just as you would diversify your portfolio, you also want to diversify your income sources. And, a big part of that, common stock dividends. Yes. Now, some of them are, being frozen, cut back, suspended. That's par for the course in a recession, but that's also why you don't put all your eggs in the basket of one or two industries that pay high dividends. You spread that among all industries, and then also supplement that, and you don't rely just on common stocks for that income. Look at preferred stocks. A lot of companies that have preferred stock, like you look at the banks, for example, they have restrictions that are placed on their dividends, but that's their common stock dividend. Preferred stock dividends keep getting paid. And so that's another benefit to supplementing and diversifying your overall income picture so that you're not overly dependent on the very low yields of cash and bonds you can get from equities.
Yeah, and Greg, most people don't realize that preferred stocks, even though they have stock in the name, they're actually more bond-like than they are stock-like in so many ways. So thanks for that. I appreciate that, Greg. As usual, it's been my pleasure, and hope to have you back. And you stay with us too. We have more coming up here on The Income Generation. I'm Dave Scranton. I'll be back with Jeff Small in just a minute.